Good morning, and welcome to Morning Movie News, where, even though he gives you plenty of reason to do so, I would not underestimate James Cameron. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Avatar making headlines yet again yesterday, and the knee-jerk negative reaction from many members of the press. What happened? Well, James Cameron showed up at Fox's presentation at CinemaCon and announced that while he was pushing back the Avatar films yet again, he was now not making 3 sequels, but 4, and that the first would hit theaters in December 2018. Some people said he blinked and moved away from Star Wars Episode 8, but keep in mind that Star Wars is now firmly planted in the December release zone. So he's going up against them no matter what. It's just the big fight's been delayed a year. Then the next film in 2020, then 2022, and then 2023. Now, some coverage, for instance, said, is it too late? Has moviedom passed James Cameron by? The Hollywood Reporter ran a piece saying that Avatar merely was a placeholder as audiences transitioned from mere blockbusters to carefully constructed cinematic universes. Although I would like to point out that so far, really nobody but Marvel proper has been able to successfully create a viable cinematic universe. So that's something to consider as well. I don't think that formula is that well established either. But James Cameron's been out of the game since Avatar was released, and he is a game changer, even when people cannot abide by the movie that he's made. It's not like people are like, oh, I don't like your movie, then it comes out and they're like, totally changed my mind. I mean, there are people who have problems with Titanic and Avatar, myself being one of them. But I think at the end of the day, I wanted to walk out of Avatar, but was stuck too much in the middle of the row of a giant IMAX theater and was like, you know what, it's not worth it. I might as well watch the rest of this thing. But let's remember that even though James Cameron hasn't made any movies since Avatar first came out, I believe, let's see here, let me just make sure I'm right here, 2009, okay? Nobody's been able to unseat him at the box office. Star Wars The Force Awakens has come the closest by joining the $2 billion club, but despite all the major blockbusters and global phenomenons that have come out since 2009, plus inflation, no one's been able to top this guy. And I think that really speaks to him being able to master a certain formula of schmaltz and VFX, visual effects. He is a genius when it comes to that combination. And I think the very things that a lot of us don't like about Titanic and Avatar are what have made them successful. And that's all him. Like, he knows how to really get people. I mean, he said that Avatar was space Pocahontas, but you know what? That very simple formula spoke to a lot of people. And you might recall that there are even people who said they wanted to commit suicide when Avatar came out because they couldn't actually go to Pandora. Disney's fixing that for you as they're building a real Pandora in Animal Kingdom, which will actually open prior to these films coming out. Now, will these films continue to not be good? I think that James Cameron, and also to be fair, I think that while Avatar has major problems, I think that Titanic, while the love story is a little bit forced, I think that and also very smartly, I think constructed when you think about it, just from a business perspective though. But the sinking of the Titanic is still one of the most fascinating, amazingly well-done scenes of all time. And these films get Oscar nominations, let's not forget, and wins when it comes to, in the big categories when it came to Titanic. So, he not only can win over audiences, but he can win over the industry as well. But he can't continue to make crappy movies, or he can't continue, at least for Avatar, to have so many flaws where it's very hard to defend it. But let's not forget that he's brought in 2 of the best science screenwriters working in the biz, Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver, who single-handedly almost, or pretty much in my opinion, with of course Andy Serkis's performance, were able to put Apes, the Apes franchise back on the Hollywood map. So I firmly believe that they can rescue Avatar and maybe actually make it something that's viable creatively as well as commercially. So I would not count out the Avatar films. And when they do eventually hit, I would be concerned if I were any studio going up against them. We'll see what happens, but I wouldn't write them off so easily. And you can be sure that with all this time that's passing, James Cameron is working on advancing technology as well. That's always been the ace up his sleeve. That's why he got so many people to go and see Avatar, and also he lent that to Gravity. To be able to say, look at these visual effects, even if you don't like the story. And Gravity had a very strong schmaltz factor as well, which worked in its favor. So that whole formula was copied with that movie. So very, very interesting. All right, so that's the first story of the day, and I'm curious, are you interested in Avatar 2 through 5? And also, what do you think of Rick Jaff and Amanda Silver? Do you have as much faith as I do? And also, what do you think just of James Cameron's track record? I know a lot of people say they want him to go back to Terminator. I'd love to see that. He also, of course, is behind the Aliens franchise. And just think about this man's track record. But his most successful films have been Titanic and Avatar, and it makes sense that he would want to stick with that property, especially Avatar, the most successful film of all time by a long shot. It's actually kind of within the neighborhood of the $3 billion club. All right, so that's the first story. The second story of the day, talk about something that, I think also could be wondered if too much time has passed, and that's Pokemon. And there was a big story that broke yesterday about the fact that Hollywood is zeroing in on finally making a live-action Pokemon movie. I guess, as Power Rangers comes to the big screen, why not Pokemon? And Pokemon's being very aggressive about trying to reach out beyond their fan base to, bring in new fans. They had that great Super Bowl commercial this year, so they're being very savvy themselves. But the reason this made headlines, particularly in the article that a number of you forwarded to me, was that, Pokemon is a Japanese idea and concept, all right? But while Warner Brothers was originally going to make the live-action movie, and they still could, the deal could still take place, because also they released the animated Pokemon movie and its smaller follow-ups. But at the last minute, Legendary has decided to make a major play for this property. And the reason that's such a headline, not only because it's Legendary, but because Legendary is now owned by China. And of course, there are very strong tensions between China and Japan. So for a Chinese company to make the live-action movie of a Japanese property could potentially be troublesome. Or maybe entertainment will bring these two nations together. I don't know. But the interesting thing is that Legendary already has a track record working with Japanese properties. Of course, Godzilla, which they have licensed from Toho Studios. And Toho, of course, has that new Godzilla trailer out, which I'm going to try and cover in the next few days. But I don't think Legendary needs to be too worried, but it's very interesting nevertheless. But even beyond Godzilla itself, Legendary is really very strongly into the kaiju business. Of course, with their Kong Skull Island movie that's coming out, and then they're going to have Godzilla Fight Kong coming up. And of course, they're very much not giving up on their Pacific Rim franchise either, which is also kaiju movie making. So I think that Legendary, interestingly enough, has maybe said, maybe Japanese properties work for us, and that's an area we should really, get heavily entrenched in, not only with our kaiju films, but also let's go get Pokemon. So I think that's very interesting. I think that Legendary, I think Akira is still set up at Warner Brothers, but maybe if that doesn't go through, I would think Legendary maybe would want to bid on that property as well. Although I think that so far they have mixed results creatively with the films they've done. I think Pacific Rim had problems, obviously, which is why it's been such a struggle to get the sequel made. And I think Godzilla had problems, which is why that franchise has struggled as well. So I think Legendary is very good at packaging these properties, but they're not so good at getting them across the finish line. So that's something for the Pokemon crew to consider while they decide which studio to... they should be like Disney. Are you interested in Pokemon? Because, they're the only ones, I think, right now who have a consistent track record. All right, so that's the second story of the day. Now, the third story of the day is James Wan was being interviewed, and he had some interesting things to say about Furious 7 and the Oscars. And I thought this was so well said and was such a good point that it was worth repeating here and finding out what you guys think about it. So James Wan, Furious 7, of course, was not even nominated for Best Song for See You Again, for Wiz Khalifa and Charlie Puth. Fantastic song, which I really do feel should have not only been nominated, but should have won, because it was incredibly touching and very well done. But James Wan then said something else I thought was very interesting, and he said not only did he feel that they were worth, a nomination for Best Song, but also for Best Visual Effects, because he said, all the other films that were nominated did things that you've seen before in movies, right? But he said his team was able to essentially bring Paul Walker back to life and allow him to complete his final movie, even though he tragically passed away early on in filming. For instance, when you watch that movie, the warehouse sequence when Paul Walker's character has to fight Tony Jaa again, they have their rematch after the highway action sequence. Paul Walker isn't involved in that scene whatsoever. That's one of his brothers is to stand in and also digitally putting Paul Walker's face on his brother. And just the way it was shot, I think it was a very good and very clever use of visual effects and just practical filmmaking to be able to pull that off and to allow Paul Walker not only to complete the film, but to still be a major part of it, which I thought was very touching when I saw it. And of course, you have that end sequence where Vin Diesel's able to say goodbye to him, and that's one of the saddest, most touching things I've ever seen. It had me break out in tears in the theater. I broke out in tears discussing it in my spoiler review. That's how absolutely powerful and emotional that it was. So yes, I think it is very odd that that wasn't able to be nominated. And talk about not winning, it wasn't even nominated. So the real question is twofold. One, did Universal run a strong enough Oscar campaign for the film? Or were they like, we have other movies we have to take care of, and who's going to vote for Furious 7 for an Oscar, right? So they might not have done a strong enough push anyway, even to get people to maybe change their mind. But that also does speak to how the current voting bloc, it's changing. We'll see if things are different this year. But the voting bloc right now wouldn't take a film like that seriously, which is really horrible because, right now, and I feel very strongly about this, and I know a number of you do as well, some big risks are being taken artistically, both in terms of craftsmanship and storytelling in this genre, from Mad Max Fury Road to Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, and that's not being taken seriously enough. They win the craft awards if the movie is respected, and I think that it's Christopher Nolan was able to get away with this, and I think a number of us felt that this was like the first domino effect, but the other dominoes haven't fallen over, and for some reason people just aren't respecting the risks that are being taken in that medium. So that's why I said, for instance, you should go see Hardcore Henry, because at least that's something that's trying to push the genre forward artistically. All right, so those are the three stories of the day. Now, a lot of you are asking me, so that's going to be the viewer question. A lot of you are asking me about the headline that AMC is now considering allowing texting during some showings of films. This was a big headline to come out of CinemaCon. Regal, of course, had said the same thing, I think like a year or so prior, and they have basically been, shouted out of the idea by the internet. And AMC is getting a similar response. So much so that they actually had to release a press release saying, we are going to protect the movie-going experience for our patrons, and we promise you that if we do allow texting, it will be in a manner that will not bother you. Now, I would say that people are so against texting in a movie theater. Someone pointed out in response to this that tragic shooting in a movie theater recently, actually I'd say maybe also about a year ago, was about texting. Someone was texting during previews, and that led an aggravated senior citizen to actually shoot the man, which was very tragic all around. But that just shows how much tensions are running high. I think it also boils down to a feeling of respect, I think that's why people get so upset. It's not just like, oh, you're texting during a movie. It's like, you have so little respect for me as a human being, in my experience, and you just, I think that's partially the problem. So AMC says, well, our solution to this is to have special screenings or showings, or perhaps a section of the theater where people can text. Well, if you have special screenings, let's not forget that, I think it'd be very hard to sell out a movie theater where people can text, right? I mean, you might get a couple of people who are like, yeah, this will be awesome, we can go text in the movie theater to go, but I think everyone else would avoid that like the plague. So it would be hard to give it a choice showtime because you'd be taking that theater away from potentially selling out, which would hurt the box office of that movie, as it comes out of the weekend. And of course, with the box office headlines that are made today, a studio wants as much money as they can squeeze out of any weekend, right? So that would be very problematic. Second of all, if you only have a section of the movie theater where texting is allowed, say you put it in the back so no one can see the lights, when people text, they make noise, they talk, maybe someone says something funny so they laugh, or they want to tell their friend about it. You're just creating an unruly, rowdy crowd. So nobody wants to be in a theater with that, even if it's behind them, right? I mean, imagine how annoying someone talking behind you is. How about a whole group of people behind you texting? I mean, I get upset when, and I'm sure many people do, when you have roving bands of tweens who are like, oh, maybe I want to watch this movie, maybe I don't, I'm going to leave the theater, come back in. That's happened to me a few times, and it's absolutely maddening, right? So it's really weird that I think one of the biggest problems with movie theaters today, and I think that's why Alamo Drafthouse has such a following, is that movie theater managers just simply aren't willing to police their crowd, right? It's like the Wild West once you get into a theater. It's like, good luck in there. And now they want to even go further in that direction and let people do even more what they want. And I think that's really unfortunate. So do I think this will happen? I don't think it will happen. And I think the biggest thing, the head of AMC said, oh, well, the thing is that if you ask a millennial to shut off their phone, it's like asking them to cut their arm off. And I think that the response to that is, really? Does this person have so little respect for what they're about to watch that they can't even give it their full attention? Whenever I see someone texting in a movie, it's because they don't like the movie, because they're bored. They're just passing time. And I think that we don't want movie theaters, they worry about protecting the sanctity of the movie theater and keeping people from staying home. All through CinemaCon, they're like, screening room sucks. That's the app that's going to allow you to stream first, movies when they're released at home for a premium price, right? Like really premium. But still within the range of affordable for, I think, a number of households, right? So that's kind of what screening room is. But at the same time, they're making it seem like movie theaters are just a place for people to kill time, right? Not that they're going to witness some art. I mean, how about, can you go into a museum and just stand in front of you're not supposed to really talk a whole lot in a museum. Can you go in front of a painting and stand in everyone's way and text and not even look at it? That's kind of like the same thing. And they're degrading the art form. So you have everybody at CinemaCon, all the people, all the creative talent being like, movies are an art form that need to be seen on a large canvas. And then you have a theatrical distributor that these studios and creators are trying to protect by saying, boo, screening room. And they're saying, yeah, what's on screen is so meaningless that if you want to text during it, go ahead. Because we know that you're more interested in what your friends have to say than is sitting still for 2 hours to watch a movie, right? It's just very weird. I went to see Monuments Men, and it was just such a bad experience because there were these two girls next to me, and I was like, I'm surprised they're interested in the movie Monuments Men, this World War II movie with George Clooney that doesn't have very good reviews about stolen art during World War II. But I'm glad these tweens, by themselves, by the way, want to watch the movie. Good for them. And then they proceeded to text during the entire film, to the point where luckily it wasn't a very good movie, so I was like, I'm not going to get too upset about it. But I was like, you paid money to sit in here. Why would you pay money to sit in a movie theater and not watch the movie? You can text out I was in a mall. It's like, you can text in the mall, in the food court, or on a bench for free. Why are you in here in the dark texting on your phone? It's really weird, it's rude, and I think it should not be encouraged, and I think that movie theaters should be stronger with patrons about no talking and no texting, just like Alamo Drafthouse. I think that if movie theaters want people to go to them again and not stay home, they should make it a place where people feel I can actually enjoy the movie. Because I think in a lot of cases, that's not what's going on right now. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below today's top 3 stories and that general viewer question, texting in movie theaters, anything you'd like to see covered on Monday, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.